What do you find scary in an analog horror series? Many are inclined to say that they find a slow build-up with an intense atmosphere to be the meat and potatoes of digital horror series, while some praise the narratives and how the information is conveyed with visual aids, animation, text, etc. A major strength of the genre is that most of its most pressing limitation is simply the imagination of its creator. Most series are quite comfortable being in the visual medium, but it isn't unheard of for others to try and branch out and become something of a more auditory or cryptic experience. The point is, the genre is quite open-ended and allows for a lot of creativity, but naturally, some patterns begin to emerge. I've been vocal about how much I don't care for a lot of the samey tropes used in a lot of circumstances. I've seen more than enough FNAF clones to have my fill for a lifetime. But what if someone decided to break all the rules? Keep the presentation simple, but become a maverick and shock the community to its core. urbanSpook is a name being shared frequently for his shocking series that I assume goes by the same name. The very basics of it is that a serial killer composes paintings of his victims while he avoids the authorities. The paintings revealed are the actual paintings of the creator himself, flexing his artistic abilities. Even the music featured in the videos is custom composed by him. The main draw is the vicious level of detail featured. The paintings are given grisly context by paragraphs describing each victim and their torment at the hands of this human monster. Something that stands out amongst a crowd of demons and ghosts and other supernatural threats. This all sounds very nail-biting, does it not? It may not be a super original premise, but it sounds like stellar execution. The views on each video would certainly imply it, no? Well, some of you may know, but this series is kind of bad. Tremendously bad, even. I wager that it is my personal least favorite series I've ever seen. For some reasons you might expect, and some reasons you might not. It's no secret that this series has risen to quite the infamous status in the last couple of months, especially in September. I don't normally make negative critique videos, but once I sat down and watched everything released front to back, I can see where people are coming from with their grievances. The shock factor that made the first episode stand out became so publicized and over the top eventually that it just became impossible to take seriously and began to look like the ramblings of a child. This single image has completely shattered the reputation of this entire series once the full context was given. You'll see why in a few short moments. My goal with this video is to critically analyze the uploads, explain some key details, and offer some insight and critique on how I would improve the series, because advice is something it unquestionably needs. I should also clarify this isn't a tea video, because I know that the creator has engaged himself in some internet drama, and I'm not really interested in covering it extensively. I might refer to it, but I'm primarily talking about the series, not the guy behind it. I'm mostly a gaming channel, don't have plans to stop being that, but analog horror coverage does help me pay my bills a lot more. I mean, look at the difference, oh my word. Tell you what, I'll cut you a deal. I can do more of these, but you have to watch my other videos. No buts, I've already IP logged you if you made it this far. But if you do want me to conveniently lose your IP address, it probably wouldn't hurt to sub to the channel and leave a comment down below. Without further ado, let's talk about urbanSpook. The 3rd of November 2022 will be graced with the first upload called Faces. The video's description reads as follows. I just started converting VHS tapes to digital and I found a bunch of tapes in the basement of my apartment complex. This was on one of them. So the channel we're seeing is our unnamed narrator uploading these tapes after he's converted them digitally. Let's see what's inside Faces. The tape begins with an honest-to-word content warning. Normally I'd make fun of that, but with this series it's completely warranted. Keep the warning in mind because I have something to say about it later. We're told that police, 6 months ago, found 3 paintings in an abandoned storage unit that connects to some of the recent murders. Victim 1 is Carla Gray, who was stabbed 36 times and all of her teeth were removed. The painting, Carla's Teeth, is giving some pretty obvious hints as to what happened. The second victim was Jackie Graham, who drowned and suffered 27 stab wounds in the perineum. If you don't know what that is, it's your gooch. And if you don't know what that is, then you're too young to be watching this channel. Log off. They were able to determine that she was alive when she was attacked, and we have another painting to show. The third named painting takes after the murder of James Miller, who had his face torn open, but somehow managed to live several days without it. 2 months after this discovery, more paintings were discovered, but no concrete cases have been linked at the time. You're going to want to keep an eye on this one, because it embodies just about everything wrong in the series. The video ends with the killer contacting the police via mail and sending 3 photographs of the first 3 people featured in the paintings. We're given a glimpse into the killer's mind when the police find a painting titled Self-Portrait later on. What can we digest from this upload? We know that there's a serial killer who delights in taking extremely brutal methods and forms of mutilation against innocent people, and likes to depict them in artwork he paints and seemingly leaves. We know that the police are in hot pursuit, but stumped about his identity. Right away, the shocking levels of brutality reveals itself center stage. Some of the torture borders on fantastical and shocking in a more digestible way, while others are just kind of gross. Was there really no other way to have someone be stabbed to death than through their gooch? The violence was preceded with a warning at the beginning of this video, and this is your last chance to turn back, because it only gets worse from here. The Lighthouse dropped on December 27th, 2022. The second tape reveals that Bill Collins, who discovered the self-portrait of the killer in his own home, went missing, along with his 2 daughters. In his house, they discovered one of the kids hanging by a noose. With the tasteless description of it, she was only 2 months, while a partially censored photograph of a baby is shown. The Collins family car is found by the oceanside, along with the painting dubbed Long-Necked Angel, describing the previous victim. They searched a nearby abandoned lighthouse and found the charred remains of someone named Daniel, which matches one of the paintings previously featured in the last video. They find what remains of the Collins family crudely butchered inside of a barrel, along with some photographs of the victims, but also an unknown 4th photograph that doesn't match anyone on file, which means it could be a future victim or the killer himself. The biggest development in this upload is that the kills might sometimes be discovered out of order because the paintings can either be found before a body or after a body, as well as the killer using photographs alongside paintings, which means he's very well versed in his multimedia. The 2 biggest problems rear their ugly heads in this upload. Firstly, the violence has already transitioned from semi-realism to being comically shocking and crass for its own sake. I understand that discoveries like this happen more than people would like to admit, but seriously? Just look at how it's portrayed. We don't get any insight into the police investigation other than just knowing it exists from these tapes, and whoever is editing them feels it really necessary to promote the shocking nature of Long-Necked Angel by intentionally using evocative language like, "She was only 2 months." This highlights another major issue I have with this series. Why did these tapes exist? I might be asking the wrong questions and wondering something I shouldn't because I should be focusing on the artwork, but who would describe a police investigation like this? There was a phone number listed in the first tape, so I was under the impression this was made by the police themselves. But what police report is written like this? Most police reports have a level of detachment in the details written so people are able to logically consume it without being overwhelmed. No police report would intentionally write this. It seems like it's written to shock the audience a lot more than makes sense in universe. And speaking of shocking the audience, January 9th of this year would curse us with the upload In the Walls. Corey and Margaret Beck went missing 10 days ago. Wait, Corey Beck? Spaz Kid? Another abandoned location, this time a paper mill, leads to a body discovery. I really have to give a final warning because this particular description is just flat out disgusting. Now, only the bottom half of Corey and top half of Margaret were found because they had somehow been sewn together? The killer somehow shoved an entire brick down Margaret's throat with the word meat written on it. Corey's jewels have been removed by pulling. Through a series of events, Corey ended up in contact with the killer sometimes earlier and managed to get a photograph of his face, which finally gives us a face attached to these horrible deeds. The issues I have come with the first video. Remember this painting with this title? Now, let me show you how this video starts again. It makes sense why people reacted negatively, or at least began to realize recently, because this is just disgusting. I honestly don't think there's a reason to include this in the way urbanSpook did. So, he wants me to believe that someone would cut two kids in half, sew them together like some kind of bootleg Mengele experiment, and take it at face value and be scared of it? There's still a level of realism needed to make such a shocking event work, and this has none of it. You really have to be horrified and not question how that makes sense, because it becomes completely unbelievable and juvenile if you don't. And the situation only gets viler. The meat labeled brick down someone's throat, and the painting title of Corey leaves little to no imagination, and it's treated with the respect and tact of a carpet bombing campaign. I'm of the opinion that you can include elements like this in your work, but surely you would expect that the creator would understand that people would react quite violently to seeing such a sensitive topic used so poorly, but apparently not. I highly doubt the intention was mocking in nature or trying to portray it as anything past a horrible, disgusting event committed by someone utterly reprehensible, but the poor writing from the tapes doesn't help this event feel real. Would the police not investigate differently if they knew that this killer had more carnal motives in mind? It's treated as just a brick in the wall, just another footnote of this guy's reign of terror over wherever this takes place. I don't even think it's mentioned where the setting is. This is why people reacted so poorly to the series. The like to dislike ratio is still fairly positive because the series has a high production value, but what is that in the face of something that feels like a 13-year-old shock jock dribble? Sadly, the clue is even more of this drivel. The series has found its formula since the second upload, and it rarely strays from it. I can sum the entire series with one sentence. Police found a guy, killed him in a way that would make Dr. Doom blush, graphic detailed descriptions for the pain the victim was in, and no police work being done. There's some kind of painting or photo taken, and the police can't do anything about it. That describes this video to a T. I honestly don't care to recite the stupid wax tower people were somehow unable to find until it was hours late. But at least this time, a new plot point is introduced when another photo of the killer being taken, which looks nothing like the first guy, which implies that it's either multiple people or this killer is supernatural somehow. Despite that development, guess what? The next video, The Witness, is the exact same thing again. If you aren't totally captivated by the descriptions of people dying and seeing their paintings, then you're pretty safe to just drop the series altogether. For some, this is fine because they were already enjoying the formula, but if I have no reason to expect anything different, then why should I be invested? So I can hear how the killer, who still doesn't have a name, commit whatever urbanSpook thought of at that moment? To be honest, I don't really care what comes next because whatever potentially interesting developments about the killer's motive or identity is buried under a sea of "they had to eat their baby. Isn't that just so shocking and evil and messed up? I'm just so evil and messed up that no one else would write that, but I would. No one else is doing what I'm doing. I'm a twisted psychopath." I honestly just gave up the series when pigs dropped, to be honest. I completely dropped it when I was expected to swallow a pig's eyes being switched with someone's completely seriously. I honestly don't care what comes next, because it's just gonna be more of this. More juvenile executions, more people being butchered by a killer with no known motive, with seeming precognition powers. All converted from tapes to digital by someone. Since I'm done watching the videos, let me explain all my problems. I know that the series is still ongoing, I think, provided the creator hasn't fully retreated to his hug box, so some of these might be addressed later. Before I do that, there are good things about the series I should mention. The music in each video was made by the creator himself, I'm pretty sure. There's quite a bit of work put in behind these slideshows, and it's absolutely worth commending sincerely for the effort. Some of the illustrations are truly haunting, but some of them kind of stupid and look bad. It's a bit inconsistent, I'm afraid. I have such beef with the narrative device of tapes as well. I don't think it really has to matter who is uploading them, because it isn't the focus. But what kind of police department would carry themselves like this? I hope these aren't being distributed by the police, because how is anyone supposed to call with information if we're given no information aside from names and photographs? Where does this even take place? And just the police work done here is ridiculous. How can you have someone who's killed like 30 people and not done a single profiling technique? How are accidental photographs taken by 10-year-olds the best lead you had versus an entire department of grown adults reviewing the footage? There isn't even a single mention of when the killer strikes or repeating patterns, because the delivery on each tape is exactly the same. The police find out days or weeks afterwards. I think there was like one witness in the entire series. The killer, or killers potentially, are just flat out silly. I understand that part of the frightening appeal to them is to make them seem like they're aliens on Earth by knowing nothing about them or why they're killing people, but you didn't think to add anything after 30 kills? Anything at all? This one might be a bit more subjective, but is the adherence to the story really that important to not build a staggering profile for this guy? I honestly shouldn't be calling it a story, because it isn't. A story implies some narrative progression, which is so scantily found in this series that I could compile all the relevant info that isn't just gushing about body parts into a video, and it wouldn't even reach 5 minutes. The only things we learn about the killer is what he looks like and that there might be another one, and that's it. There isn't progression, things just happen. Things progress linearly, as in people are found during an ongoing investigation, but you can barely tell because the investigation is so underwritten it might not well as exist at all. And most damning of all, what people really despise about this series is the level of violence. What I think doesn't work about it is that you, the audience, really need to be constantly disgusted at all times, because if you feel like the events have become too comical, the entire series simply does not work, and you can't be immersed. A shame it's really easy to laugh at the series when it's hyper-focused on being as edgy as possible. You can call me Dante the Urban Spook. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Violence wouldn't be as offensively bad if it existed for a reason. Like, if we had at least a little understanding of why children are dismembered. I don't think you can excuse it all by saying it happens in real life when there's at least a chain of events one can look into at real similar crimes to understand why it happens, and not a failure of the writing at hand. It's a shame because the foul stench and reputation this series has might make people afraid to push the envelope and dare to be bold and describe some of the more graphic body horror in fear of not being like urbanSpook. I know the intention wasn't to portray these as good. The killer is the obvious bad guy doing obvious bad guy things, but it being so detached from reality, I don't find it scary, I find it silly. I think you can write all of this. Okay, maybe not the Corey one, you probably shouldn't reference Oni plays while talking about a child being treated like— what if this was all one big troll? I wonder if it was actually shocking and bad on purpose and made just to troll people. If that were the case, then there was a tremendous level of effort put into all the paintings, music made, and wouldn't explain why urbanSpook being extremely offended when someone doesn't like his series very much. Flip-flopping between saying it's bad on purpose and not? Who do you think you are, Slime Beast? Call me crazy, but I don't think your motto for shocking people should be anywhere close to trigger the libs. Gets criticized once, dies. I will say that people sometimes ironically become fans of this series as a troll, and it can be pretty funny. The series is just so annoyingly formulaic and just cringe that I made my very own episode of urbanSpook's Analog Horror for you to enjoy. This is basically how I see every episode. I had this merchandise too. $40 for a damn shirt. You are out to lunch, buddy. That might be more shocking than some of the kills he wrote about. I don't want to make this entirely a negative video, so what if I made an earnest effort to make this series actually good, but without changing too much? I want to keep the ideas, but make it not bad, so here's what I have to offer. Sometime in the late 1980s, the police station of West Spring, Colorado, is graced with a mysterious letter from an unknown individual. The letter mocks the police for being too late for something, which spurs them into action. They determine the letters were sent from a home not too far, but upon investigation, they find it abandoned. Inside, an untitled haunting painting of someone burning in a fire is discovered. They hold on to it for now. They decide to warn the public about a potential arsonist and to report anyone suspicious. Later, someone's home erupts into flames despite their best efforts. The police are mortified to make the connection that the painting was a prelude to the killer's intentions. A couple days later, the same man sends another letter from a different address, this time with a photograph of a boy who went missing months ago, which forces the police to consider that this man has been behind many, many more crimes than they initially thought. They begin to print and distribute videotapes with as much information as possible to alert the public that someone hides among them, and to avoid all strangers, as well as abide by a new curfew and to lock their doors so this maniac isn't able to get to them. The tapes include the letters written by the killer in hopes that someone will be able to recognize the handwriting. Everything changes when our main protagonist receives one of these tapes, who recognizes the handwriting as his father's, and begins to question the exact reason why his father always kept his art studio doors locked inside their house. That wasn't a tremendously complicated summary, but I've established some things that would drastically improve it. We have a more coherent story going on, a way for the artwork to be included into the story, have the videotapes be more believable, and a bit more character work to latch on to make people care and emotionally invested. I know not everyone will like what I've suggested, but that's the wonderful thing about suggestions. They can be ignored or improved upon. I am very curious to hear what people in the comments section would add or change about the series, because I'm sure people have their own opinions on it. I want to stress, I'm not making this solely to dunk on urbanSpook, even though it is kind of funny, but I want to see these independent series succeed. I admire how people can single-handedly make these, and I want to encourage people to make more. But I don't want them to feel discouraged because they don't want to be compared to urbanSpook. You can use a lot of the elements featured in the series well, and I've seen it done well. Go check out the 2013 movie Prisoners, which is quite similar in a lot of ways, but with one difference. It's actually good. TLDR, the series sucks ass and is pretty cringe, and the guy making it is also kinda cringe. I don't feel this way about other series, so if I ever do cover more, I won't be quite as rude as I am here. Because when you're rude to this series, you get internet clout. If you want more of these types of videos, then check out my other stuff, which is my actual best work. But if you've enjoyed yourself today, I'll see you again sometime next week. And until then, have a lovely rest of your day.